7:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to you, friends. How are you? Man, it's been a busy day. And it continues with Jonathan Fahey calling in on our Newsmaker hotline. Jonathan, always great to have you on. You, former director of ICE, I want to talk a little bit about, and you are our legal analyst as well. So I have a lot that I want to get to. First of all, let's talk about President Biden, his executive order on the border. And I'm not going to play any of the audio because, quite frankly, it's just, number one, is really hard to understand. And number two, it's infuriating because Jonathan, he went out there and, talked about how it's the Republicans' fault that there isn't any real border security because of failed legislative opportunities. But as you know, Jonathan, H.R. 2 was passed in the House and Chuck Schumer refused to talk about it or debate it on the Senate floor.
Yeah, exactly. It's so hypocritical, and just there's so much dishonesty that comes out of this administration, particularly on the border/immigration issue. And I think, everyone that has followed this issue knows what they're doing is purely political, and they have no intention of actually doing anything to stem the tide in any meaningful way. And if Biden is reelected, we're going back to full-on open borders, and it's going to be a massive push for this mass amnesty of everyone they let in violation of the law. But I think it's interesting because you do wonder how the media will cover this, because will they just basically, be sort of the PR arm of the administration and promote this narrative that it's the Republicans' fault or they can't work together and all this stuff. And maybe it's, Biden is probably thinking, well, people on his side know it's not true and that they're not going to really do anything meaningful, and people on our side know that they're not, but they're hoping that they get the people in the middle and then could go back to this open borders agenda, which they've been pushing. But it's really kind of funny about the way they push this thing, and I think we've talked about it before, but every issue the Democrats don't want to solve, they make it seem like it's the most complicated thing ever, right? Like, yeah. Oh, we can't solve this problem until we get broadband to Guatemala and solve climate change and get bank cards to people, and it's utter and complete nonsense.
It's three words, man. Build the wall. It's all you got to do. Build the wall.
Yep. Build the wall, remain in Mexico, arrest people that come here illegally and prosecute them, and criminals that are here, people are here illegally and commit crimes, deport them. Like, these are simple things that probably 90% of America would agree on, and they're totally sensible. And this administration, as you know, they have stated policies that they will not deport people unless they're convicted of an aggravated felony, and that's only a starting point. That's only when they'll consider deporting them. That doesn't mean they automatically get deported. So, like if Laken Riley's killer were to get released on some sort of legal technicality or something like that, and be found not guilty or have the case dismissed, they will release him back into the United States. That's their policy. So it's truly, it's so hypocritical. It's so dishonest. But they're just hoping they could, move some people or take this issue a little bit off the table or move the needle on it. But I think anyone serious knows they're not serious. And watching, I don't know if you watched Secretary Mayorkas on Neil Cavuto's show yesterday afternoon, but it's almost like he seems ashamed, like he knows everything they're doing, they're lying, and he almost seems ashamed about it. But, he still is an open border zealot and will do it for the cause.
It's difficult. You mentioned that. Mayorkas was on with Neil Cavuto because I was sitting in my downstairs basement studio, and I got this big TV to the left, and my computer is right in front of me, and I have a way to, maneuver all that audio into my computer. And I saw Mayorkas, and it's like, you know what? I didn't have the stomach for it. I mean, he lies, he obfuscates, and he just goes on and on without saying anything. And it's just, he's sort of like this professional liar. And I didn't even listen to the interview because I knew what he was going to say.
Yeah, it's really pathetic when you see him, and just the lies that they're telling. It's not just the I would call sort of micro lies that the border secure and all this stuff, but every narrative they push is entirely false. And he has said something to Cavuto about, we're taking it to the cartels. And it's like, I think later on, I watched probably too much TV yesterday, but Ted Cruz is on one of the shows talking about how the human trafficking cartels, their revenues have gone up, thousands of percent since Biden's been in office, because this administration has done more to embolden, to strengthen, to enrich the cartels than anyone could imagine. And the cartels are endorsing Biden for this election. The last thing they want is President Trump in, and it's such a joke when they act like they're taking it to the cartels. The cartels are certainly laughing all the way to the bank with this thing.
All right, so I've got a question. So we talked about, and 30 seconds or less for the answer, okay? So we talked about building the wall, remain in Mexico, deport the bad guys, right? So those are, at least to me, I think, the big three. If we did those three, that would solve how much of our illegal immigration problem?
I think it would be 95+%.
That's all we. That's all we got to do. Yeah. All of this other stuff about the amnesty, the kind of amnesty, the app, and all this stuff, it's all just BS.
It's all BS. And amnesty should be a non-starter. And maybe in 15 years, when we've done all these things, and if there are some people that have done extraordinarily good things for the country, maybe there should be some window. But until then, those three things solve the problem, because people are not going to spend $7,000 to $10,000 to come here if they know when they get here they're going to get kicked out or they're not going to be able to get in. So it ends. It ends this human smuggling pipeline that's, again, enriching the cartels.
It is 7:45 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Jonathan Fahey is joining us. We're going to ask you about Merrick Garland and his testimony yesterday. Straight ahead, time to check the roads on WTN. Yeah, today, a high of 84 with light showers. Right now, 71 degrees. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I will not be intimidated, and the Justice Department will not be intimidated. We will continue to do our jobs free from political influence, and we will not back down from defending democracy.
So earlier I was talking about as they destroy democracy, by the way. So one of the things that I was talking about earlier, Jonathan Fahey, was, they get up and they have their chest puffed out and they take the oath and all of these other things. And they always say the same thing. They come in strong and, they're proud of the men and women of whatever agency they work for and so on and so forth. But then when you start drilling down into some of the very basic questions, it's like Mayorkas. They both just start filibustering, and that's what, at least it seems to me, that's what Merrick Garland did. A couple of main takeaways. The first one, the one that I really want to know about, is your opinion on the conversation between Andy Biggs and Attorney General Merrick Garland over the tape, the Joe Biden tape that we apparently are not going to be able to hear.
Yeah, Are you going to play it or?
No,
yeah,
you go ahead.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. I found that was one of the most interesting takeaways is this tape that they're inventing reasons not to turn this over, and all of the reasons are so laughable. And anyone that's been in law enforcement, been in prosecutor, knows how bad they are. One of them is, I think their one reason is it will prevent people from cooperating in future investigations.
Yep.
Even though at this point the transcript's out there's a full report and everyone's talked about it.
Right.
But some cooperator, I did this forever. Of course, that's laughable. The second one is, they already have it, so it doesn't matter, which again contradicts the first reason. But my biggest takeaway is that tape must be amazingly bad for Joe Biden. I mean, I am dying to hear it because I think it's so bad that we'd be talking about the 25th Amendment, because they wouldn't be making up these crazy reasons not to turn it over if it wasn't just crushing to Biden. And his Garland's explanations are just utter nonsense. The other thing that's really offensive is he freely questions their motivations for wanting the tape, right? It's political. Right. But then if you question him, he's beyond reproach. And like you said, you're attacking the fine men and women of law enforcement, which of course is not true, but it's a manipulative trick, and you see them do it all the time. It's like, no, they're criticizing you and your politics, and the men and women of law enforcement don't like it either. But this fallback on that is so bad. So I thought that was one of the most interesting thing. The other thing that's interesting, sort of on that same lines, is, you can't criticize the investigation. You can't criticize the Justice Department. Yet he said nothing about Joe Biden when he got on there, criticized Robert Hur, put people out there to lie about Robert Hur, not only the findings of his report, but the underlying factual findings as well as the ultimate findings. Yep. He put people on TV to lie about the circumstances of how they brought up Beau Biden's death. He put people to go on there and say it was shoddy work and all of these things. And Merrick Garland didn't say anything about that. Why wasn't that out of bounds? He's never said anything about that. And he also perpetuated this other thing that they've this false narrative that Joe Biden was fully cooperative. But if you read that Robert Hur report, there was a whole line of questioning where Joe Biden refused to answer. I did this for a number of years. I don't consider somebody fully cooperative if they carve out things they're unwilling to talk about. I would say they were partially cooperative. But again, that just shows the hypocrisy in the whole thing. And, and the other thing that just stood out to me, they talked about he's offended when people say two tiers of justice. Yet in the 2020 campaign and in early 2021, and I found New York Post article about Merrick Garland saying the same thing, that they were talking about two systems of justice as part of their campaign strategy in 2020. They did it on racial lines.
Of course.
So now so it's like, no, well, you can't say they're two. He should be saying we shouldn't say they're three, because that was their main campaign strategy, as far as I could tell, in 2020 was, sort of this racial division and, keep people locked down and miserable under COVID. And, so it's kind of funny that now you can't say it, but, you can look up, and Garland was saying it, everyone in the Democratic Party was saying it, and now you can't say it. It's just so much hypocrisy, so sanctimonious. It's like your point with Mayorkas. It's like you want to just throw up when you listen to him, because it's like he doesn't answer any questions. He acts like there's always some reason he can't answer these, certain questions, like some super secret important reason.
Well,
when the reality is, they know it's politically damaging.
And the other thing that I would say about the Justice Department is saying that there's a worry about people using Biden's voice and making deep fakes out of it. I mean, that also was just utterly ridiculous. But here's the thing, Jonathan, and I've only got a second left, but we don't necessarily actually need those tapes to know that Joe Biden is in serious decline. Wall Street Journal came out with a piece in the last 24 hours or so. I think it was released yesterday afternoon, last night, whenever it was. But they're talking about Washington, D.C. insiders reveal worrying new details about Joe Biden's ability to get through meetings. And they can't really understand him. He's speaking very quietly. He's freezing in meetings. He's not the same person. I mean, again, we don't need that tape to know that Biden is in sharp decline.
Yeah, and we see that every day. And my assumption is if he's so bad in public when he has to have note cards just to get through these like low, not particularly complicated meetings, and he has to stare at note cards, that it must be horrendous behind the scenes. And you do wonder, like, who really runs the country? Because clearly he has no idea what's going on.
Obama. I'll say it. Obama. Yeah. You think Obama?
Yeah, you do. It would make sense because it's like, Biden is this figurehead that they could pass through the election in 2020. But I think it's so bad, and I'm just waiting for some insider to write a book as to what goes on. I would love to see a day in the life of Biden or a day in the life of Kamala Harris, because it must be, one, hilarious, but also scary at the same time.
It brings up Weekend at Bernie's. I mean, it doesn't. It's just like the jokes write themselves. Jonathan, great analysis as always. Got to run. Appreciate you joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Been telling you about my friends at Stoltzko for quite some time now, and their incredible pole barns. Now you can put them anywhere, and your new pole barn from Stoltzko can function as anything. Now go to their website. It is stoltzko.com, and take a look for yourself at this amazing construction. You can build a pole barn for your vehicles or for your horses. You can utilize a pole barn as an event space. You can even live in a pole barn if you've got the space. We call them barn dominiums. Now, Stoltzko is indeed among the elite in pole barn construction here in Middle Tennessee. So check them out online or on their Instagram and Facebook accounts. Call them for an estimate, 615-622-5600. 5992 for Stoltzco. Online at stoltzco.com. STOLTZCO, Stoltzco.com. This is a company that is going to help you out. If you're even thinking about getting a pole barn, you've got to call these folks today. 615-622-5992 for Stoltzco. 754, Ken Weaver, what's coming up in the news?
Well, money has run out that cut internet rates for nearly 500,000 Tennesseans. Calls to divest from Metro Police to give teachers and other city employees higher cost of living increases. A gunfight outside a U.S. embassy in the Middle East. The Biden immigration rule has been triggered. And AT&T outage update at 8 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.